Why homes sit for 90 days on the market. Some houses sell in a weekend. Others sit on the market for 3 months plus. Same city, same interest rates, same headlines. But completely different outcomes. And when a house sits on the market for 90 days plus, most sellers assume one thing. They assume the market is bad, but the uncomfortable reality is this. Most of the time, when a home sits that long, it's not the market. It's positioning. And understanding that difference can be the difference between selling in 2 weeks or becoming the listing everyone scrolls past. Today I'm going to walk through the real reasons homes sit on the market for 90 days. Not the surface explanations, no, the structural ones. The ones that actually determine whether a property sells or quietly becomes stale. Let me start with a scenario I see all the time. A house sits the market, $725,000, let's call it. The seller believes the upgrades justify the price. They've done the kitchen, they've painted, they've taken good care of the property. So they feel confident about where it's priced. The listing launches. The first weekend passes. There are a few showings, but no offers. Another weekend goes by. More showings, still no offers. And at that point, the market has already given some feedback. But many sellers don't recognize that moment for what it is. Instead of adjusting early, the listing stays exactly where it started. And that is the moment when a property quietly begins the journey towards 90 days on the market plus. Because once that initial window passes, regaining momentum becomes much harder. The first thing we have to talk about is price. Everyone says price matters, but the way the price affects a listing is more complicated than, most people realize. When the home first hits the market, there is a short window where the listing is at its most powerful. It's fresh, it's new. It appears at the top of search results. Buyers who have been watching the market, they see it immediately. Agents send it to their clients. This is the moment where the market reveals its true opinion of the property. And the market gives feedback quickly. Usually within the first 2 weeks, you see it in the showings, interest, requests, offers, if any, or silence. So the silence is the information, but the mistake sellers make is interpreting the silence incorrectly. Instead of adjusting early, many listings stay priced where the seller wants to be, not where the market actually is. And once that initial momentum is lost, the listing begins to age. And aging listings behave differently. buyers start to assume something must be wrong. They assume there was an inspection issue, or a structural concern, or a pricing problem, or a seller who isn't serious. And once that perception sets in, that property starts fighting an uphill battle. So price isn't just about numbers. It's about timing. A second reason a home sits, there's a dramatically different format because buyers don't experience homes in first person anymore. They experience them online. The first showing is usually digital, photos, video, first impression. And if those photos fail to caption attention, buyers simply a lot of times just move on. There are hundreds of listings competing for attention. Scrolling is fast, attention spans are shorter than ever, so poor photography or poor listing issues or cluttered staging can quietly eliminate a house from consideration. Even if the property itself is actually great, because listings never got the chance to create the curiosity. And curiosity is what drives the showings. Now, let's talk about condition. This is where reality and emotion collide because sellers live in their homes. They know the memories, they know the upgrades they've done. They know the story of the house. But buyers don't see the story. They see comparison. They see options. And buyers today compare homes extremely quickly, within seconds. They are comparing flooring, kitchen updates, bathrooms, lighting, paint, landscaping, everything. So when a home hits the market, it's not competing against homes that sold last year. It's competing against the homes currently available. And if a listing feels slightly dated, or slightly tired, or slightly neglected, buyers will often choose the property that feels move-in ready. Even if the difference is cosmetic, because convenience has value. And buyers calculate that value constantly. Another factor that causes homes to sit is accessibility. Surprises people, I know, but showing availability can dramatically influence buyer behavior. If buyers cannot easily schedule showings, or if time windows are restrictive, interest drops fast. Because buyers today are touring multiple properties, often within the same day. If one home is simple to view and the other requires coordination and delays, the buyer frequently prioritizes an easier option. Convenience affects exposure, and exposure affects the offers. Now, we also need to talk about marketing, because listing a property and marketing a property are not the same thing. A listing can exist on the MLS, but still receive very little attention. Effective marketing means creative visibility, video, digital reach, agent networking, targeted exposure. Buyers discover homes in many different ways. Search platforms, social media, agent recommendations, relocation services, and when a listing lacks active marketing, it can quietly disappear into the background. Even if the property itself is excellent, now let's talk about psychology, because markets are not just financial. They're emotional systems. And psychology plays a massive role in why listings stall. Once a property sits long enough, it begins to accumulate stigma. Agents see the days in the market, buyers see the days on the market, and they start wondering why. They assume something hidden exists, even when nothing is wrong. This creates hesitation. Hesitation reduces showings. Reduce showings, reduce offers, and the cycle feeds itself. That's why early momentum matters so much. Because in most markets, if a home hasn't sold within the first 30 days, it begins entering a completely different category. Buyers assume something must be wrong. Agents assume the price is off, and the listing slowly transitions from being seen as a new opportunity to being seen as a stale inventory. Once that perception happens, it becomes very difficult to reverse. Now, from the buyer perspective, right? Homes sit for maybe 90 days sometimes. They think they represent an opportunity, which they can. And the longer it remains, they think, okay, it's still available. The more motivated a seller may become. Motivated sellers often become more flexible on price, on timelines, on concessions. But buyers have to evaluate carefully, because sometimes sit for a legitimate reason also. Structural issues, location problems, property defects. But other times, homes sit simply because they were maybe priced incorrectly at the launch, or marketed possibly poorly, or listed during the wrong moment. And those properties can represent some of the best opportunities in the market. If you're a seller watching this, understanding why homes sit is incredibly valuable. Because most listings that stall come down to a few very inconsistent mistakes. Pricing based on hope instead of data. Listing photos that fail to immediately caption attention. A property that feels dated compared to competing homes. So, restrictive showings, availability, or weak marketing. None of those things mean a house is bad. But together, they can quietly stall the listing's momentum. The housing market is not just supply and demand. It's positioning, it's perception, and it's timing. once you understand those dynamics, you start to see why some homes sell immediately while others quietly accumulate 90 days on the market plus. Same market, same city, completely different outcomes. And almost always, the difference comes down to strategy. If you're thinking about selling this year, or you're trying to understand how to evaluate homes that have been sitting on the market, subscribe to this channel. And if you have any questions about your own situation, no matter where you are, drop them in the comments. Many of the videos on this channel come directly from those conversations.